1984, Ghostbusters premiered. Overnight, the film became a cultural phenomenon. The tune "Who You Gonna Call" echoed through every corner, and four ghost hunters in gray jumpsuits became legends. But right there on the poster, right there in the script, a stark truth stood out. Winston Zeddemore was almost erased from history, while Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis remained clear, radiant, and front and center. Why was the only black character pushed out of the spotlight? Why was Ernie Hudson forced to stand behind the other three stars when he was truly the heart of the movie? After 40 years, Ernie Hudson has finally broken his silence. It was Hollywood that turned its back at the last minute. The poster didn't have me. The script was changed. I was cut out of the story. Behind the laughter was a terrifying dark corner, a scheme to sideline and bury an iconic character. Today, that truth is finally exposed. Who is Ernie Hudson? From the very moment he was born, his life began with bitterness. 1945, Benton Harbor, a poor town on the shore of Lake Michigan. In a rundown house, a baby let out his first cry. Just 2 months later, his mother died of tuberculosis. His father had already passed away. The baby Ernie Hudson officially became an orphan raised by his grandmother, a hardworking woman. No parents, no guidance. Hudson grew up with an overwhelming sense of absence in a community where black children were usually steered only toward heavy manual labor. He once recalled, "In my childhood, there weren't many choices. Either work in a factory or slide deeper into poverty." But Hudson carried a different dream. At school, he was captivated by acting, by theater, things his friends considered a luxury. After serving in the U.S. Marine Corps, he chose to defy the safe path. He studied drama at Wayne State University, then went on to Yale School of Drama, a place that produced many Broadway legends. But fame didn't come quickly. Through the 1970s and early 1980s, Ernie Hudson was only a faint name in Hollywood. He hustled through countless supporting roles, from brief appearances as a cop in Fantasy Island or The Dukes of Hazzard to a few B-grade action films like Penitentiary 2, 1982. He once admitted bitterly, "Hollywood didn't know what to do with actors like me. I wasn't a comedy star, and I wasn't the hero type either," until one fateful role suddenly appeared. The golden opportunity, the role of Winston Zeddemore. In 1983, Columbia Pictures launched the Ghostbusters project. Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis, three big names from Saturday Night Live, were already secured. But the script still had one missing piece: Winston Zeddemore. In the original draft, Winston was not a supporting role. He was written as a central character, a sharp, battle-hardened former Navy man who joined the Ghostbusters from the very beginning. Winston was the ordinary guy in a supernatural world, the stand-in for the audience, the bridge that helped viewers understand and connect with the strange team of ghost hunters. This was the kind of role that could turn an unknown into a star. Hudson knew it. He walked into the audition with absolute determination. After years of Hollywood shutting him out, he had finally found the biggest chance of his life. "I read the script and I thought, this is it. This is the role that can change my fate." But at that very moment, when the world was cheering for Ghostbusters, Hollywood's cold betrayal had already begun. The original script and Hollywood's about-face, June 1984. Ghostbusters officially premiered. Within just a few days, it was no longer simply a movie, but a global cultural phenomenon. The line "Who You Gonna Call" echoed from bars to schoolyards, while the gray jumpsuit and proton pack became images burned into an entire generation's memory. The box office soared past $295 million, a staggering figure in the 1980s, leaving Columbia Pictures grinning with satisfaction. Hollywood called it a box office earthquake. The three Saturday Night Live alumni, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis, instantly became some of the biggest box office names in the world. They dominated every poster, every trailer, every interview, every promotional campaign. They became icons, and Winston Zeddemore, the only black character in the team, originally written as the bridge between the audience and the Ghostbusters, the one meant to be the heart of the story. Yet by the time the film reached audiences, Winston only appeared in the second half, as a latecomer, a rookie standing humbly behind the other three stars. For Ernie Hudson, who played Winston, that was a tragedy. Remember, before Ghostbusters, he was invisible in Hollywood, born into poverty, orphaned at a young age, raised by his grandmother. Before 1984, Hudson's career consisted only of minor roles in TV shows and B-movies, leaving no mark. Landing Ghostbusters felt like a one-way ticket from darkness into the spotlight, a golden opportunity he believed would transform his entire life. Hudson often recalled the moment he held the original Ghostbusters script in his hands. On paper, Winston Zeddemore was not a minor throwaway character, but one of rare depth. He was written as a former Air Force major, an expert in weapons and explosives. A seasoned, grounded man clear-headed enough to be the backbone of the team. Winston joined the Ghostbusters right on page 8 of the script, present from the beginning part of the journey throughout. Hudson remembered Winston was there from the start. He was the voice of the audience, the heart guiding the whole story. But then came the about face. Just weeks before filming, Columbia Pictures ordered a rewrite. The reason they wanted Bill Murray to have more screen time. To the studio, Murray was the ticket-selling machine, the centerpiece of all marketing campaigns. To achieve that, Winston was pushed down to secondary, and so the character's entire backstory was erased. No more military past, no expertise, no depth. Winston was reduced to just an ordinary guy, looking for a paycheck as long as it arrived on time. He was even pushed all the way back to page 68 before finally appearing. Hudson described the moment he realized the shock. I came to the set and discovered that the character I had signed for was gone. My dream role had been buried overnight. The pain didn't stop there. When the film officially hit theaters, the whole world went wild for the trio of Murray, Aykroyd, and Ramis. They dominated the posters, the trailers, the television interviews. And Winston. Many international publications completely cut out his image or blurred and shrank him to the point of being unrecognizable. Some promotional campaigns outright left Winston out. At one point, even his character's name was spelled wrong in the credits. A public humiliation. Hudson bitterly said it felt deliberate. The poster didn't have me. The script was changed. I was cut out of the story. Instead of standing shoulder to shoulder with three legends, he was pushed to the sidelines. From a dream role, Winston became a psychological wound. Hudson called it devastating, a soul-crushing experience that turned a dream into a nightmare. And he understood clearly, this wasn't just about a rewritten script. It was raw proof of how Hollywood operated, where a black actor could be sacrificed just to keep the spotlight on three faces deemed more safe and bankable. To the global audience, Ghostbusters was a legend. But to Hudson, it was a scar. Every time he looked back, he didn't just see a classic movie, he saw his own image erased from the very history he helped create. Hudson later admitted, "I don't want to put it all on race, but the feeling of being pushed aside was real. Hollywood back then was not inclusive. I was sidelined. 40 years. 4 decades, and that wound never healed." Then in 2022, on The Howard Stern Show, Hudson finally broke his silence. He said outright, "From the very beginning I knew they didn't want me to be an equal part. And I'm certain that was not accidental." The studio fell silent. Fans were stunned. Because this was no longer just a complaint. It was an indictment. A hammer strike shattering the wall of lies Hollywood had built for 40 years. But there's a little-known secret. Winston wasn't originally written for Ernie Hudson at all. From the script's earliest days, another famous name was the chosen soul. And that's where the tragedy truly began. The Eddie Murphy rumor and the role of Winston. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Ghostbusters is the story of Eddie Murphy. From the very beginning, when Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis were still tapping out pages of the script, the character of Winston Zeddemore was at the core. And for 4 decades, a rumor has persisted. Winston Zeddemore was originally written specifically for Eddie Murphy, the blazing star of Hollywood in the early 1980s. At that time, Murphy had already become a giant on Saturday Night Live. All he had to do was walk into a room and producers revolved around him. If he said yes, Winston wouldn't have been just the new guy. He would have been a star standing alongside Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis. In fact, the very first draft of the script reflected exactly that. Winston appeared from the earliest scenes, had plenty of comedic beats, key action moments, and was given memorable punchlines audiences would never forget. In some drafts, Winston was even portrayed as smart, military-trained, experienced, the one who held the team together. A strong, layered Winston who could easily have become an icon on par with Murray's Venkman. But Hollywood always moves with the times, and Eddie Murphy right then was at the eye of the storm. He signed on to Beverly Hills Cop 1984, the film that turned him into a global superstar. With his packed schedule, Murphy turned down Ghostbusters. That opportunity fell into the hands of a far lesser-known actor, Ernie Hudson. Hudson stepped in with full faith. He had read the early drafts and knew Winston was once written to shine. He believed this was the golden chance to escape the invisibility of his previous roles. But the moment Eddie Murphy stepped away, everything shifted overnight. The script was rewritten, and almost everything that once promised greatness for Winston vanished. Winston became nothing more than the new guy, showing up halfway through, standing in the background, filling in behind the three already famous SNL stars. And that's where the conflict began. Many have asked, was Winston shrunk down only because Eddie Murphy didn't take the part, so all the spotlight could be handed to the main trio? That question has never been fully answered, but it left behind a bitter truth. Ghostbusters became a blockbuster. Eddie Murphy rose to superstardom with Beverly Hills Cop, and Ernie Hudson was pushed aside, forever haunted by the feeling that Winston, and his career, had been stifled right at birth. Career or race? The question that haunted Ernie Hudson for years, was Winston always pushed aside because I was Black? Hudson answered bluntly, it's very tempting to blame it on race, but it's more complicated. He never denied that skin color might have been a factor, but he also didn't want to reduce everything to an accusation. Yet many fans and critics saw it clearly as a form of underlying racial issue. The evidence in marketing: the studio always prioritized the three white faces, Murray, Aykroyd, and Ramis. Posters, trailers, global campaigns. Winston either vanished or was blurred into the background. Hudson admitted bitterly it felt deliberate. So was this about race or just commercial logic? Hollywood's tendency to spotlight the most bankable stars, that question remains debated to this day. But for Hudson, the feeling of being pushed aside was an undeniable truth. If Hollywood outside was cold, then on the Ghostbusters set, Hudson felt the chill cut even deeper. Internal conflicts, the cast and isolation. He recalled that his co-stars were friendly, but he was never truly at the table. Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis had already been a family forged through Saturday Night Live. They shared their own chemistry, their own stories, their own bonds built over decades. Hudson, the newcomer, the outsider, and also the only black man in the group, was more of an add-on than a pillar. In an interview years later, Hudson admitted bitterly, "It was the most difficult film I ever did psychologically. On the outside, the world was laughing out loud with Ghostbusters. But on the inside, Winston Zeddemore and Ernie Hudson lived in isolation, locked out of glory, even while standing in the same frame. And it was that very isolation, compounded by the studio's indifference, that planted a psychological wound in Hudson, lasting for decades. Until 40 years later, when he finally broke his silence, his words were not just career memories. They were an indictment of Hollywood's brutal injustice. Psychological impact and Hudson's career. Ghostbusters should have been a dream. But for Ernie Hudson, it turned into a lingering nightmare. Instead of a breakthrough, his career became trapped inside the very role that was supposed to make him a star. Hudson admitted that for years after 1984, he lost faith in himself. The posters without Winston, the marketing campaigns that pushed him aside, made him constantly wonder, maybe I wasn't good enough. Instead of becoming a stepping stone, Winston became a shadow weighing heavily on him. While Murray, Aykroyd, and Ramis soared, one becoming a comedy icon, another a hit screenwriter, another a celebrated director, Hudson was left with smaller, sometimes forgettable roles. He appeared in The Crow 1994, Airheads 1994, and many TV series, but he never reached the heights Ghostbusters had once promised. He once said bitterly, "Ghostbusters should have changed my life. Instead, it made me question my worth." That confession cut deep. Hollywood had not only stolen the spotlight, but also planted in his mind a lasting doubt about his own value. There was a time Hudson avoided mentioning Ghostbusters, interviews, fan conventions. He declined because every mention of Winston was like reopening an old wound. It was the most difficult film I ever did, psychologically. He wasn't talking about the shoot or the props, but about the feeling of being left outside even while standing in the frame. Ghostbusters, a legend to the world, but a cage for Ernie Hudson. Yet just when Hudson was ready to let go, another force pulled him back. Fans saved Winston. The audience never forgot Winston. They called him the everyman hero, the ordinary man in an extraordinary world. While the other three Ghostbusters were scientists, Winston represented the viewers. The people without degrees, without scientific weapons, but brave enough to step into the fight. For the black community especially, Winston was a symbol. In the 1980s, when Hollywood rarely allowed black characters to appear in blockbusters, Winston brought pride. Black children finally had a hero to dress up as on Halloween, a figure to hold their heads high. He looked like us. He fought ghosts. He was one of the team. At fan conventions, Hudson truly shined. If the posters left him out in those halls, he was the center. Fans lined up for photos, for autographs. They chanted his name carrying rare Winston toys from the 80s. Hudson recalled, "I realized maybe Hollywood didn't see me, but the fans always did." The internet only amplified that fire. Ghostbusters forums and fan pages constantly revisited the injustice Hudson faced while celebrating Winston as the team's silent soul. Winston action figures were re-released. Winston cosplays appeared everywhere. From a character once shrunk down on screen, Winston became the gathering point for fan loyalty. If Hollywood once tried to bury Winston, it was the fans who resurrected him, turning Ernie Hudson into living proof of the power of fandom to rewrite history. Ghostbusters 2 and the repeat of injustice. After 5 years of waiting, Ghostbusters 2 finally premiered. Millions of fans around the world were excited to see the 4 figures in those familiar jumpsuits return to bust ghosts. For Ernie Hudson, this was supposed to be the golden chance for Winston Zeddemore to step into the spotlight to finally correct the injustices of the first film. He believed that this time, Winston would have more screen time, more depth, and true recognition alongside his teammates. But only weeks after the film's release, the reality left Hudson deflated. Once again, Winston was not developed as expected. Instead of exploring the character, the script pushed him back, giving him just enough scenes to fill the lineup, but not the weight of meaningful dialogue. Fans noticed, too. In several film magazines of the late 80s, readers voiced their disappointment. Winston deserved more. We wanted more of him. Even though the character was with the team from the very beginning, Winston was still kept out of the spotlight. And the old haunting returned. The official poster, Winston was still missing from the center. International promo material, Murray, Aykroyd, and Ramis remained the focus, while Winston faded into the background as an extra. Even in the merchandise, t-shirts, models, toys, Winston was often released later with fewer options, and sometimes left out entirely. Hudson admitted he had hoped the sequel would be a turning point, but he bitterly said, "I thought maybe part 2 would be different." But it was the same fight all over again. Ghostbusters 2 proved a harsh truth. The injustice was not a one-time mistake, but a cycle. 32 years waiting for recognition. And then, after more than 3 decades, Hollywood finally opened the door to redemption. The Redemption. Ghostbusters Afterlife 2021. In 2021, Ghostbusters Afterlife premiered, directed by Jason Reitman, the son of original director Ivan Reitman. The film was described as a love letter to the fans, and for Ernie Hudson it felt like an entirely new chapter in his life. This time, Winston was no longer the outsider pushed to the margins. He was portrayed as a successful man, a CEO, a tycoon who had built his own empire yet quietly stood behind to protect the Ghostbusters. If Egon Spengler Ramis was the brain, Peter Venkman Murray the charm, and Ray Stantz Aykroyd the passionate soul, then Winston now became the pillar, the one ensuring the Ghostbusters' legacy would never disappear. The moment Winston appeared on screen, fans erupted with joy. After 37 years, the only black member of the team was finally honored. He was no longer just an add-on, but the heart that rekindled the past and passed the torch to the future. Hudson shared emotionally. "For the first time, I felt Winston was truly respected. After all these years, it meant everything. After decades of being overlooked, he was finally recognized for his true worth." Fan reactions reinforced this. Across forums and social media, emotional comments poured in. "Seeing Winston as the one who saved Ghostbusters healed something in me too." For the black community, it was also a historic moment. Winston not only returned, but stood as proof that a black character could hold the central role in a legendary franchise. Even more remarkable, Afterlife didn't just bring recognition from fans, but also from the industry. The film received nominations and awards in multiple categories, from visual effects to contributions to pop culture legacy. Winston, and through him, Ernie Hudson, was celebrated in numerous reviews, hailed as the silent soul of Ghostbusters. Cast ensemble awards, standing ovations at fan conventions, all became a kind of spiritual trophy for Hudson after nearly 40 years. If Ghostbusters 2 was the repeat of Injustice, then Afterlife was the overdue redemption, a visual apology offered to both Winston and Ernie Hudson. But is the story truly over? The answer is no. Conflicts without closure. Even though Winston was recognized in Afterlife, the conflicts over what happened in the 1980s remain unresolved. When asked, some producers denied deliberately pushing Hudson out of the spotlight. They explained that at the time, Murray Ackroyd and Ramis were already major stars with box office pull, and the marketing campaigns had to focus on them. According to them, it was simply commercial logic, not about race. But Hudson did not accept that. He repeatedly stated the studio wasn't inclusive. They didn't see Winston the way fans did, and that hurt. For him, what happened, from having his role cut in the script to being absent on posters to missing merchandise, could not be brushed off as coincidence. It reflected a Hollywood that had never truly been ready to give black actors equal footing. That conflict still hangs in the air. Who was right, who was wrong? Was Winston sidelined purely for box office strategy or because of an invisible prejudice embedded in the system? The only certainty is that Ernie Hudson's story has gone far beyond a single film. It has become a symbol, proof of how 1980s Hollywood treated black actors. A mirror reflecting injustices that people still debate to this day. Ghostbusters turned Ernie Hudson into a legend in an unusual way, not through glory but through wounds, pain, and ultimately resurrection. After 37 years of waiting, a role that once made him doubt his own worth has become a symbol of resilience and justice. Ernie Hudson finally broke his silence. And when he spoke, Hollywood had no choice but to listen. Hudson. Today, from forgotten man to living symbol. At nearly 80, Ernie Hudson still walks into the gym with a lean build, strong arms and eyes as bright as the day he first wore the Ghostbusters jumpsuit back in 1984. Time seems only to have added calmness and gravitas to the man who once felt Hollywood had forgotten him. He lives in Hidden Hills, California, a neighborhood where many major stars have made their homes. The 400 to 800 square foot house Hudson purchased in 2016 for just over $3 million has since skyrocketed in value. Yet Hudson has never been the kind of star to flaunt wealth. For him, it's simply a place of peace where he lives with his wife, Linda Kingsburg, his partner since 1985, along with their 4 children and grandchildren. Hudson's net worth is estimated at around $5 million. That figure may not be as dazzling as some of his more famous peers, but it speaks to endurance. He once admitted that the first time he held a $10,000 Hollywood check after taxes management and agent fees, he was left with just $370 in his hand. He laughed, but with a trace of bitterness. Ghostbusters should have changed my life. But instead, it made me question where my worth was. Today, however, Ernie Hudson is no longer the man blurred out on posters. He has become an everyman hero, a symbol of perseverance. Ghostbusters fans cheer loudly every time he steps on stage at conventions. They call him the humble soul of Ghostbusters, the character who represented the audience stepping into the supernatural world. On screen, Hudson has never slowed down. After Ghostbusters Afterlife 2021 and Frozen Empire 2024, he continues to work on new projects including the series Boston Blue, a spin-off of Blue Bloods where he plays a pastor with remarkable depth. For him, every role at nearly 80 is not just work, but proof that his artistic fire and vitality have never gone out. Looking at Ernie Hudson today, you see a living testament. You can be erased from posters left out of campaigns. But if you stay true to yourself and believe in your worth, history will remember your name. Behind the spotlight, Ernie Hudson is not a star tangled in scandals or wild parties. He is a family man. Personal life and marriage. A family man. Hudson married Jeannie Moore in 1963 when he was just 18 years old. The two had 2 sons, Ernie Hudson Jr., who later followed in his father's footsteps into acting, and Rahaman Hudson. That early marriage came at a time when Hudson was struggling between survival and artistic ambition, and it did not last. Still, Hudson always remained close to his children, seeing family as his most important anchor. In 1985, as his career began to stabilize after Ghostbusters, Hudson met and married Linda Kingsburg, a former marketing executive. Together, they had 2 more sons, Andrew and Ross Hudson. Unlike many Hollywood couples whose marriages quickly fell apart, Hudson and Linda have stayed together to this day, a partnership that has lasted nearly 4 decades. He once shared, "Linda keeps me grounded. She reminds me that no matter what happens in Hollywood, I'm still just Ernie, the husband and father in this family." The Hudson family now includes grandchildren, and at fan conventions, Hudson often speaks with joy about being a grandfather, a joy he says is fuller than any award. It may be this stability in his private life that allowed Ernie Hudson to withstand Hollywood's injustices. While the world debated Winston Zeddemore being sidelined, he always had a home to return to, arms to lean on, and a family to be proud of. Winston Zeddemore, the character Hollywood once tried to dim, ultimately became an inseparable part of the Ghostbusters legend. For 40 years, Ernie Hudson carried bitter memories, the rewritten script posters missing his face, the unfairness of marketing campaigns. But he was also the one who dared to stand up and break the silence, allowing today's audience to finally understand the whole truth. Even if Winston never received the spotlight equal to Murray Ackroyd or Ramis in the hearts of fans, he will forever be a true Ghostbuster, a symbol of perseverance, humility, and resilience. Hudson's legacy is not only his role in a legendary film, but also a lesson in justice and voice. Because in Hollywood, where everything can be rewritten, distorted, or hidden, the truth will always find its way out thanks to those who dare to speak the unspeakable. The final message: there are truths Hollywood tried to bury, but voices like Ernie Hudson's will never disappear. And because of that, Winston Zeddemore lives on.